Bird Street in the Bird Street Gallery. Many of you were there. I can recognize many faces. There are a couple of new faces, which is wonderful. We really welcome the new faces into the conversation.
Welcome everybody, I'm Denise Zinn, for those that I haven't met formally yet. I am the BBC for Teaching and Learning, and I want to welcome all of you here today. I'm really glad to see this really rich mixture of people in the room, all of whom I think will contribute some perspective that is going to alter our thinking in some way or another. We depend on diversity to develop richness. I think it's diversity that stretches us. And so one of the components of enabling good thinking, says Nancy Klein, is that you must have diversity in the room, always, because that is the thing that helps our thinking to expand.
I think just comparing between now and the June retreat is that now we're beginning to talk about really implementing all the ideas that we've been talking about in terms of curriculum reform, in terms of decolonizing and Africanizing the curriculum. The biggest challenge is it comes with the implementation and having capacity to recurriculate. And we haven't really defined exactly how far we're going to go with the reform. Some say maybe there's no need for the reform. Some say maybe our curricula needs soft reform. But then there's a feeling that others modules, other programs require radical curriculum reform. So what we need to do is that at this stage, the faculties have a choice as to whether they want to recurriculate or not, and therefore people are moving at their pace, and because this is not university policy at this stage, so we need to make it university policy to say, look, we need to take the whole issue of recurriculating seriously. Otherwise, we've got all these beautiful ideas, and like we said in June again, that look, we come, we discuss, we have brilliant ideas, and I'm very proud of the fact that now we are beginning to document what we discuss. There was an issue that we were not documenting what we're discussing. We even digitally and visually, documenting what we discuss. So that is a step forward, but what we need to do is to translate it into university policy. I see and I hear more student voices being represented this time around. And this was something that we put emphasis on in June, and it is becoming a regular feature as it was not previously when these discussions were taking place. So we need to hear the voice of the students all the time, because the students actually are the reason why we're here. They are the reason why we've got all these jobs with the university. That's why the university is there. It's for the students. So we need to listen to the students and make them feel part of this whole decision of recurriculating. So I think that's where we're at.
My name is Yonela Mashalaba. I'm a Bachelor of Human Settlements Development student, third year. What came out precisely to me was to really acknowledge that we come from different perspectives of things, different backgrounds, and to be able to not necessarily throw all of that away, but to find a way to understand each other and to understand where people come from in terms of where the lecturers come from, like their perspective, the student perspective of doing things. So in a way, bringing yourself into the lecture hall instead of what you would probably see in the previous pedagogy, where you are kind of expected as a student to leave your learning, your culture at the door, and then come in to almost assimilate to a new way of doing things. So what I would like to see change going forward is more implementation of these type of discussions, because valuable material actually comes from these settings, but how perhaps we can implement that, and the manner in which we can implement that, whether radical or soft approach to things. So, and I think for me, we have to be radical if we want to see any change, at least anytime soon. And radical does not necessarily mean now, but radical means an attitude that is committed to change. So that's how I would define it.
Avinash Gavanji, I'm the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Law. I think the interesting discussions that have taken place, at least on the first day of this retreat, indicate to me how far we've come over the past few years, but also from the first retreat of earlier this year, in terms of translating theoretical concepts, grappling with issues like humanizing pedagogy, notions such as Africanization, decolonization, and how we are all collectively trying to bring that into something practical and focused in the broader discussions relating to transformation. And the curriculum, it's evident, is at the heart of that, and reconceptualizing what the curriculum is, the role that staff play, students play, the approaches that we adopt. It's actually an exciting process. And what I've really enjoyed doing during the course of today is, in a sense, actioning some of that, discussing best practices, in some cases failed experimentation, and actually making things concrete in the sense of coming up with an agenda, perhaps reconceptualizing some of the questions that we've been asking, but coming up with an agenda as to how we're going to take this forward for our institution. The student representatives, after a few years, they change, the staff changes. It's the institution, it's the faculties, it's the broader project that remains the same. So the work that we are doing, it's an ambitious project. It's not just for posterity, but it's really for the future of our institution, and in terms of what we're trying to do for our students. And in our case now, we've just been rebranded, as you know. It's about creating that next generation of lawyers who are the new Mandelas and Chaskalsons and Tambos and Mosenekes. And our curriculum needs to speak to that, but it goes way beyond the curriculum in the traditional sense of what is a curriculum. It should be our entire approach. And that involves or talks to an ethos. And that's an ethos that should be seeping into each staff member. It should be seeping into each postgraduate and each undergraduate student, so that in a sense we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. But of course, we're not an island, and what we're doing at the faculty level needs to tie in with what the institutional vision and focus is. And that's what's really exciting about what I think we're about to do, which is to start crafting some curriculum statements at an institutional level. And for a faculty such as ours, which has been, I think, at the forefront of some of the experimentations that have taken place in the institution, it's going to be really interesting for me to see to what extent have those experiments already spoken to the curriculum statements of the institution, and to what extent do we again need to retweak and remodify our approach in order to align with what is institutional best practice. So we've got the right people here, certainly the right student voices, the right leadership and staff voices to be able to direct us. All of these things for me is an ongoing, continuous, evolving process, and I look forward to seeing what the next evolution and iteration of that is going to be. Thank you.
My name is Sandile Mjamba. I'm a student at Nelson Mandela University and the academics officer for the SRC of 2017. Platforms such as this retreat give an opportunity and an opium of debate to discuss the potential of actually reconfiguring a system that can respond to the challenges of the country. We want to define a student of NMMU that is different to any other African university. One that can become an innovator, a scientist, an educator, an entrepreneur, an industrialist. One holistic and that can respond to every sectoral demand of society. When it comes to the students, we want from these particular platforms to be able to engage directly on a continuous basis with all the echelons of power. So we want a university that is diverse in its opportunities for its students, because without students, there is no university. So this retreat has given us a platform to start to discuss as students how best to improve the university's current structure and the way that it operates, and also the quality of graduates it produces. So this retreat is effective, but it needs to continue. It needs to be broadened, and it needs to be more inclusive. So we think that this is a brilliant initiative. We think that the information itself needs to be disseminated, and having these profound discussions about student leadership, curriculum transformation, student voice, it is a progressive sign that the new name change indeed is headed in the right direction, and we'll assume ownership of that particular name change through this platform. And I think it's a brilliant initiative, and I think it's one that should continue for the next few years.
So today, for me, what was important was for us to touch base and go back to what were the themes that came out. You know, the ways of knowing and thinking, the ways of being, student voice, and the like, to say, after 4 months, what has come up? You know, what has changed? What have we learned from those experiences? What is it there that we would like to add? And by doing that, I think, as this group of a collective, to say, how in our individual spaces have we, you know, come to also realize some of the things in the spaces in which we are, especially in terms of students, in terms of managers, in terms of ordinary staff that stand in front of the classroom and lecture. Because I think to have these different layers in this kind of conversation is important, because it has much more impact, because we can do, you know, go back to the spaces in which we operate and practice to make the changes that are necessary. But what is more important for me, I think we are sort of at a stage of saying, how do we then take what we have and what we've learned from, you know, so many things that happened in the past. FISMA's fall, we've had invited guests talking about decolonization, and so that these things just don't happen in a vacuum. They happen for a reason. And how can we tie all of those things together for us to be able to look at a curriculum that is really going to serve the kind of student that we would like to see, and the kind of staff member that would like to see at this university. So for me also, in terms of the themes then that we started with this morning, to say, what do we understand in the readings that we have in terms of humanizing pedagogy and the mutual vulnerabilities, which is underpinned by a humanizing pedagogy and a critical pedagogy. Because at times people feel that humanizing pedagogy is soft, but they do not understand that it is based on a critical pedagogy which examines the social injustices and the realities that our people live in, and how we as co-creators of knowledge acknowledge, you know, those kinds of experiences, that these experiences form part of the learning process, and how can we mediate and mitigate these issues when we do our teaching and learning in the classroom.
My name is Ilse Olkers, and I'm the facilitator of this workshop, the second workshop in this series of 2 related workshops, teaching and learning retreats. This one following on from the one we had in June on the Bird Street campus, where we had a very experiential process, an encounter with the text and context that is central, the area within which our Bird Street campus is situated. The purpose of this retreat that we are having here on the Mission Vale campus is to reflect on the learnings and the data that we harvested from our June workshop, and to collectively craft those learnings and the data into a set of curriculum statements that will eventually lead us to a coherent curriculum renewal, curriculum development framework that can guide and cohere and align the work, all the teaching and learning work that's happening at our Nelson Mandela University. These 2 days of this retreat is very intensive, conversation-based, intensive process of, first of all, exploring and reconnecting with the data that we gathered during June, adding to that, extrapolating that, rethinking that, synthesizing all of that, and then we go into the actual distilling, the narrowing and the distilling of all that information into the key dimensions that would make up our unique Nelson Mandela University curriculum statements. The purpose of these statements will be to guide the work, align the work, cohere the work around teaching and learning in all the different faculties and all the different spaces in our university, including the institutional enablers that are necessary to facilitate and enable this radical renewal to happen within our teaching and learning space.
I'm Denise Zinn. I'm the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Teaching and Learning. And today we picked up on a teaching and learning retreat that we started in June, focusing on elements that take us towards a curriculum framework. And today was a really inspiring day where people were picking up on the themes of ways of being, ways of thinking and knowing, ways of acting and doing, and on student voice, and incorporated those with ideas on decoloniality and humanizing pedagogy. And so what is emerging are really rich discussions that people are finding disruptive in terms of their thinking. They're coming up with really new concepts, epistemic disobedience, what it requires for us to take the jump into curriculum development that is different. And so we're looking forward to these culminating in a set of draft curriculum statements that will take us forward into developing a curriculum framework for the Nelson Mandela University.